Yo, 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 what's that word? This is the 3012 Inning Podcast, episode 22. We about to knock it out of the park. It feels good to be back. This episode will be heavily based on recent transactions in NFL free agency. I'm not going to be grading the offseason as a whole because, again, there are still signings to take place. There's the NFL draft that's coming up. We have interviews, and teams are going to still make deals in general. So we're going to focus on by division each team in those divisions. And I may say a little bit about how I feel about them surrounding free agency on an individual level. But without further ado, we're going to jump right into the episode. Our first division is going to be the infamous AFC East. So our first team is the Buffalo Bills. We got our notes right here. And we're going to go by their top three additions, their top three departures, and my overall grade for their free agency. So the Buffalo Bills, the top three additions were Connor McGovern, Sam Martin, who was by extension, and Taylor Rapp. Top three departures were Devin Singletary, Roger Safford, and Tremaine Edmonds. I gave them a grade of B. So I like the fact that they enhanced their offensive line with Connor McGovern. Taylor Rapp was a nice young player, nice young DB to bring in. He tackles very well. I wouldn't say he's great in coverage. He's decent in coverage, but he's a nice young piece to add to that secondary. They do have an aging secondary. They also brought back Jordan Poor, which was marginally surprising. Losing Devin Singletary, they are a running back starved team. Deion Robertson would be a great draft pick for them, but we got to see again. As most people know, if you watched me before, I picked the Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl last year. They did not come through for me. We're going to see how the rest of their offseason shakes out, but I gave them a B overall. Next, we have the Miami Dolphins. Their top three additions were Jalen Ramsey, Mike White, Raheem Mostert. Top three departures were Greg Little, Mike Gesicki, and Byron Jones. We know Byron Jones essentially had to retire. He got released. I love their pickup of Jalen Ramsey. Him and Xavier Howard are gonna be great on the outside. They're gonna I won't say they're gonna battle because that's Jalen Ramsey, in my opinion, the best cornerback in the league. But then Xavier Howard is up there too, a definite playmaker in the secondary. Losing Greg Little, it's tough when you lose an offensive lineman. He has nice size, but obviously he hasn't lived up to his draft pedigree. Mike White was very important. Teddy Bridgewater, he faced a lot of concussions last year, along with Tua, and so they kind of were dealing with similar issues. Mike White was a very solid quarterback for the Jets last year. Honestly, he was probably the best quarterback they had on the payroll last year. Forgive me, my cat is doing what cats do. But I gave the Miami Dolphins an A right here because I think, again, Mike White, he's a much better backup and potential starter for, if Tua were to go out next year and just pray and hope for his health. Raheem Mostert, he was the starting running back, and I think he just adds to this team as far as, they're built like a track team. Great speed at all the skill positions. And, adding, in my opinion, again, the best cornerback in the NFL is a great addition. And their only major loss was really Mike Gesicki, but he wasn't really fitting the scheme as much as you would like him to, as far as the blocking part in certain routes. And we'll see what he do on a team that's coming up fairly soon. The New England Patriots are next. Their additions were, and when I say additions, I do mean franchise tags, extensions, and as far as departures, it can include retirements and current free agents. Just want to make that clear. So we're on the Patriots. I like that they kept Jonathan Jones, Juju Smith-Schuster, and they added Mike Gesicki from the Dolphins. The top three departures were Jacoby Myers, Isaiah Wynn, and Devin McCourtney to retirement. I gave the Patriots a B. They essentially traded Jacoby Myers for Juju Smith-Schuster. I like the fact that they kept their number one cornerback, Jonathan Jones. That was key. And picking up a tight end to replace the production, the production left by Jonah Smith, who they ended up trading. Overall, I gave them a B. Didn't think it was spectacular. Didn't think it was um, devastating, but solid overall. The New York Jets, my team. So their additions were Chuck Clark, Alan Lazard, and Quincy Williams. Departures were Mike White, Connor McGovern, and Elijah Moore. I gave the Jets a straight F. A straight up F. Our first F won't be our last. I did like the addition of a starting safety like Chuck Clark from the Baltimore Ravens. Alan Lazard, I don't get it. I think you have a very similar player in Corey Davis. And Quincy Williams, obviously, he was a decent linebacker last year for them alongside C.J. Mosley. I didn't think he was spectacular. Losing Mike White, we got to see what they do at quarterback. That's the huge question. Obviously, it's up in the air right now with the Aaron Rodgers trade. Losing the starting offensive lineman and Connor McGovern, and trading Elijah Moore to the Cleveland Browns. I'm not sure you got fair compensation in that trade. You're losing a young receiver, but he did request a trade in the middle of the season last year, so maybe he didn't like the way things were going and it was untenable, but I don't see them. Chuck Clark was a decent addition, but we got to see what comes of the Aaron Rodgers trade. It's holding up the Jets and the Packers and maybe a few other teams. We got to see what comes of that, but as of right now, I'm giving them an F, and honestly, I don't really understand the pursuit of Aaron Rodgers when you can go after a much younger option that's out there. And maybe I'll do a separate video on that. Matter of fact, let me know if y'all think I should do a separate video on who the New York Jets should actually be targeting. And it's a name we all know, but I can give y'all details and I can definitely come up with that product if y'all like to hear that. So definitely let me know. And if it's anything about your team that you thought it was a better addition or you have a difference of opinion, y'all drop y'all comments below. Again, y'all like and subscribe. I appreciate y'all. So moving on from the AFC East to the AFC North, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Top three additions were Trayvon Mullen, Nelson Aguilar, and Lamar Jackson, who was signed to the franchise tag, non-exclusive. The subtractions were Josh Oliver, Calais Campbell, and Ben Powers. I gave them a D. They lost two starting players in the trenches. If you've been watching my videos before, you know I'm very big on trench play. Both those were starters and effective players at their positions. And I gave the Ravens a D. We got to see what comes of Lamar's situation. Again, y'all let me know if y'all want that video. Next, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. Their additions were Orlando Brown, Irv Smith, and Jermaine Pratt. Departures were Hayden Hurst, Von Bell, and Jesse Bates. Grade overall, I give them a B+. It's tough when you lose a player of the caliber of Jesse Bates and Von Bell in the same offseason. They're both leaders emotionally in the locker room and just generally good players. Obviously, they drafted really well so they could somewhat soften the blow of those departures, but we got to see how it works out coming up this year. Adding Orlando Brown was a great addition. We know that Cincinnati has been struggling with their offensive line, overall talent, and depth over the years. They made a big move last offseason to improve their offensive line. It didn't improve as much as they would like it to have, but it was still improving. Orlando Brown is a huge, big addition to that offensive line. Even with their starting left tackle currently, before Orlando Brown took that spot, he was from Alabama. I can't remember his name right now, but with him moving to the right side, I believe he requested a trade, and we got to see how that works out. And maybe that changes the grade for the Bengals, who I gave a B+ to. We have the Cleveland Browns. Their key additions were Elijah Moore, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Juan Thornhill. Their key departures were Kareem Hunt, Jadeveon Clowney, and Jacoby Brissett. I gave them a B-. Obviously, we know Jacoby Brissett is one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league, can really start for you in a pinch. Did that for Deshaun Watson last year. We got to see how that goes. Kareem Hunt was another key backup player to Nick Chubb. And Jadeveon Clowney was a nice run stopper. He's kind of living off reputation with the pass rush, but again, he was a nice piece alongside Myles Garrett on the other side. And so I do like their additions of Dalvin Tomlinson. They needed help stopping the run. Elijah Moore, a nice young receiver that can develop alongside Deshaun. And I gave the Browns a B minus overall. I think they made some solid moves here. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Their key additions were Isaac Sumalo, Larry Ogunjobi, and Patrick Peterson. Their key departures were Terrell Edmonds, Devin Bush, and Cameron Sutton. I gave the Steelers a C+. I think it's good they finally added to their offensive line. We know the Steelers needed help on their offensive line and on the defensive line. Larry, he's a very strong player in the trenches, a veteran, and they're going to need that. We always know the Steelers like to keep a good defensive line. I think it was tough, and the reason I gave them a C- or a C+ was because of the loss of Cameron Sutton. A solid cornerback. I wouldn't say he's in the top 10 to top 14 range. Maybe he falls somewhere around that 13, 14 spot. A nice young player, and to replace him with Patrick Peterson, who played okay in Minnesota last year. We got to see how that goes. And, he's a Hall of Fame level player, but we got to see how it translates to the Steelers organization. A little bit of a different scheme from the Minnesota Vikings. Next, we move on to the... Give me 1 second. Move on to the AFC South. To the Houston Texans. Their additions were Robert Woods, Dalton Schultz, and Sheldon Rankins. Key departures were Jalen Reeves-Maybin, O.J. Howard, and Brandon Cooks. I gave them overall grade of A. They had a couple. This was hard to come up with the top 3 additions because I did like a lot more additions that they had, and the departures were honestly pretty scarce. Besides Brandon Cooks, obviously we know where Brandon Cooks goes. He's going to produce 100 or 1,000-yard season. Robert Woods was a nice little replacement. Maybe doesn't have the same speed after some knee injuries, but still a decent player. Dalton Schultz, a number 1 tight end. I really like this addition for either whoever they're going to pick in a number 2 overall pick this year, whether that be Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson. We got to see where they go, but they have a nice pieces to throw to, and that's always good. And they did do some work that I liked on improving the offensive line. I like the work that so far the general manager, Nick Cassaro, and how he's setting up the team for D'Amico Ryans. And so far I gave them an A. The Indianapolis Colts. Their top 3 additions were Gardner Minshew, Samson Ebukam, and Matt Gay, the kicker. Their top 3 departures were Bobby Orikiki, Brandon Faison, and Stephon Gilmore. I gave the Colts a D so far because we still don't know what they're going to do as far as quarterback. There is, again, a young quarterback out there. And at this point, I don't understand why they don't lay out an offer sheet for Lamar Jackson. I mean, if you're planning on... The Carolina Panthers already made their move. The Texans, they aren't going to move because they want to get their quarterback. And we assume that those top 2 quarterbacks, in whatever order, are going to be Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. So saying that, they're hoping and praying that either Anthony Richardson or the quarterback from Kentucky, Will Levy, falls to them. And, I mean, at that point, you're clearly selecting from the second tier of quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson he's a physical specimen, but as far as quarterback, he only has 12 starts under his belt. And you're going to look for him to lead a playoff caliber roster on both sides of the ball at this point. That's going to be a tough ask. I'm glad they got one of the top backups in the league in Gardner Minshew. And other than that, I really can't say much about it, but I gave them a D so far with a chance to improve with more additions, and especially if they make a trade that, again, I would like to see, which would be Lamar Jackson in Indianapolis. Next, you know I'm a native of Jacksonville. We got the Jacksonville Jaguar. Their key additions were Dearness Johnson, Andrew Wingard, and Evan Ingram. Key departures were Shaquille Griffin, Arden Key, and Jawan Taylor. I gave the Jags a C minus. Honestly, I really don't understand what the Jags are doing due to the fact that they just had a playoff run. I understand they invested a lot in free agency last year, so that's why they might be hesitant. I do like the fact that they brought back starting safety Andrew Wingard. He's a starting caliber safety, if not a high-end rotational piece. Cap casualty was Shaquille Griffin. Arden Key was a young defender that you hate to see them lose. And Jawan Taylor, not spectacular, but again, he's a young tackle. He wasn't on the bad side of tackles. He was on the solid to average side, maybe a little bit above average in some areas. Those are hard players to lose, and they're always going to get paid in free agency. So I gave the Jags a C minus. I don't think they improved enough here. We got to see what they do in the draft coming up. Next finally we have the Tennessee Titans. Their top 3 additions were Arden Key, Sean Murphy Bunting, and Andre Dillard. Top 3 departures were Nate Davis, Taylor Lewan, and David Long. I gave them a B minus. I like the pickup of a young defensive lineman in Arden Key. I like what the Titans do on defense, and especially their defensive line. We got to see what Harold Landry does when he comes back. They also released Bud Dupree, and they're looking for Arden Key to see if he's a better running mate than Bud Dupree was for Harold Landry, along with other young, impressive talent on their defensive line. Sean Murphy Bunting had his ups and downs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We got to see how he does in a different scheme, in a new environment. Sometimes a change of scenery is what's best for a player. And Andrew Dillard, former first-round pick. Obviously, we know the Eagles had a great offensive line, the best in the league. He wasn't able to crack the rotation, and so if he was able to crack the rotation, he was definitely that swing tackle, second string tackle. Now the Titans are giving him a chance to prove his first round pedigree, and we're going to see how it goes. And I gave the Titans a B minus. All right, we're on to the AFC West. I was so wrong about this division last year. I picked the Broncos, I believe, to come in second place in this division. If you go watch some of my earlier videos, again, y'all like, comment, subscribe, and go watch my other videos. I provide great content. So first, we're going to start off with the Denver Broncos. The top 3 additions were Ben Powers, Mike McGlinchey, and Zach Allen. Top 3 departures were Chase Edmonds, Graham Graslow, and Draymond Jones. I gave the Broncos an A+. I might be falling for the trap again because I would have gave them an A+ last year too. But I love when teams improve in the trenches and they invest in the trenches. They need to do that around Russell Wilson because you're not getting up from under him. You just gave him an over $200 million plus extension. So you're committed to him for at least the next 2 years and maybe even beyond. But it's great to invest in his protection so he has time to get to those receivers who Sean Payton has expressed that he's not thinking about trading. I'm talking about Jerry Jeudy, and Cortland Sutton. And, you know, they didn't lose much. They back up running back, offensive lineman. Draymond Jones was a solid defensive tackle, but this is a nice draft to find a defensive tackle, and we'll see what the Denver Broncos do with that. But I think Denver so far in free agency part of the offseason gets an A+. Next, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. Their key additions were Jawan Taylor, Drew Tranquill, and Derek Nandi. Key departures were Juju Smith-Schuster, Juan Thornhill, and Orlando Brown. I gave the Chiefs a C overall. I think they gained some starters and they lost some starters. I think that's the simplest way to put it. And we're going to move on from there. The Las Vegas Raiders. Their key additions were Jimmy Garoppolo, Josh Jacobs, Marcus Epps. Their top 3 departures were Mac Hollins, Derek Carr, and Darren Waller. Which was messed up. How y'all gonna trade Darren Waller a day after he posts pictures from his wedding and honeymoon? But we know the NFL is a business. Things happen, and it is what it is. I gave the Raiders a B. It's kind of strange because I do think Jimmy G is a massive upgrade over Derek Carr. I really do. We know if he can stay healthy, he can at least lead the team to the conference championship game. Strong team around him. The Raiders have a lot of building to do around Jimmy G. We'll see how they do, and I think it's essential they retain Jacobs. Um, Mac Hollins, nice young receiver, nice young possession receiver. We'll see how it goes. I gave the Raiders a B here. The Los Angeles Chargers. Key additions were Eric Kendrick, J.K. Scott, the punter, and Trey Pipkins. Key departures were Storm Norton, DeAndre Carter, and Drew Tranquil. I gave them a B minus. I think they had an upgrade at linebacker with Eric Kendricks over Drew Tranquil. That's the main reason they got this grade. Chargers haven't really done much. Obviously, they have a huge extension on the horizon for Justin Herbert, and maybe that factor into their free agency a little bit more. And overall, I gave them a B minus. Next, we have the NFC North with the Atlanta Falcons. Top 3 additions were Chris Lindstorm, Jesse Bates, and David Onyemata. Hopefully I said that right, David. Top 3 departures were Rashawn Evans, Isaiah Oliver, and Marcus Mariota. I gave the Falcons an A+. Again, I love when teams invest in the trenches. They also brought back Caleb McGarry at the right tackle position. Chris Lindstorm, one of the best young right guards in the league. Jesse Bates, one of the best young free safeties in the league. And David Onyemata I'd say above average defensive tackle for the New Orleans Saints last year. He's essential to what they do. They're trying to put a lot of young talent to that defensive line. Calais Campbell also signed with them, and they also brought Eddie Goldman out of retirement. So they're loading up on the defensive front, which I always love for a team. I gave the Falcons an A+. Another key addition for them I just want to bring up is Taylor Heinicke. I do think he could win the quarterback job this year, and we'll see how he performs, and we got to see what they do in the draft as well. Next, we have the Carolina Panthers. Key additions were Von Bell, Adam Thielen, and Miles Sanders. The key departures were Pat Elfin, Deontay Foreman, and DJ Moore. I actually gave the Panthers an A, and their key addition might be the number 1 overall pick. Again, who is projected now to be C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. We got to see what they do. Anthony Richardson. You know, you hate to give up a number 1 receiver in DJ Moore. You hate to give that up for a young quarterback. But Adam Thielen is a veteran player. We'll see. He runs good routes, so you know he's going to get open. So we'll see how that goes. I think they did good here, and I gave them an A. New Orleans Saints. Key additions were Nathan Shepard, Michael Thomas, Derek Carr. Departure were Marquez Callaway, Marcus Davenport, and David Onyemata. I gave them a grade of B-. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, top 3 additions were Greg Gaines, Jamal Dean, and Levante David. Key departures were Leonard Fournette, Shaq Mason, and the GOAT, Tom Brady. I gave them a grade of C+. All right. What are we looking at? 5? Okay. NFC West. We got the Arizona Cardinals. Their top 3 additions were Kelvin Beachum, L.J. Collier, and Will Hernandez. Okay, that's fine. Top 3 departures were A.J. Green, J.J. Watt, and Zach Allen. I gave them a straight up F at this point. Of course, retirement sucks, especially 2 Hall of Fame players like A.J. Green and J.J. Watt. Losing a young defensive lineman in Zach Allen, don't understand it. They drafted well as far as getting more athletic on the defensive general, but to lose a young defensive lineman who you developed in your system like that, I understand the new head coach, and maybe it didn't fit the new scheme that they want to run, but we got to see how it shakes out. Overall, I gave them an F still, though, because I don't think they added any any impact players. Of course, you want to retain a guard, a good or solid offensive lineman, and Will Hernandez. And L.J. Collier does have that first-round pedigree from the Seattle Seahawks. We'll see if he can rehab his play in Arizona. Next, we had the Los Angeles Rams. Top 3 additions were Hunter Long, Colum Shelton, forgive me if I'm saying your name wrong, and Marquise Copeland. Top 3 departures were Matt Gay, Leonard Floyd, and Jalen Ramsey. I gave them an F. You lost 3 starters, a great compliment to Aaron Donald, the best cornerback in the league, and Jalen Ramsey. And we understand that the Rams really went for it. They really went for it. We're trying to win the Super Bowl. And now they're kind of paying the cost for, that aggressiveness, which is fine. They won the Super Bowl, and those guys have that ring forever. But I gave them an F. You lost players at premium positions and didn't gain much back, if any starters. Next, we have the San Francisco 49ers. Top 3 additions were Tyshawn Gibson, Jake Bendel, and Javon Hargrave. Key departures were Jimmy Ward, Jimmy G, and Mike McGleachy. I gave them a B. I think they gained some starters here, especially in the trenches. Again, with Javon Hargrave, great addition for the Eagles, pass rush and defensive lineman. But he wasn't a contract year, and we got to see how he performs besides Javon Kinlaw and their other young, impressive defensive linemen. We know they invested a lot of time in their defensive line in general, and we're going to see how that goes. Losing Jimmy Ward, I won't say it's a tough hit, but it's a noticeable hit. He didn't want to play slot corner. He made it clear he wanted to go back to playing safety, so we'll see how he does with the Texans. And Jimmy G, they have a bright future with Brock Purdy, and we'll see how the progression of Trey Lance plays out. But it's undeniable that they had their most success when Jimmy G was at quarterback, leading them to an NFC championship. I think he actually may have led them to 2 NFC championships. We know that he had problems staying healthy, and we'll see how that goes with the Raiders. But, we'll see how it goes. I do like Brock Purdy, but losing Jimmy G is something. We have the Seattle Seahawks next. Top 3 additions were Draymond Jones, Bobby Wagner, and bringing back Geno Smith. Top 3 departures were Poona Ford, L.J. Collier, and Rashad Penny. I gave them a B. Again, I think they bring back key starters at premium positions, especially a leader to the level of Bobby Wagner. We'll have to see. Will Bobby Wagner retire this year? Hope not. He's still playing at a high level. Draymond Jones, again, a young defensive lineman. They needed a lot of help stopping the run. And they need a lot of help on defense in general. I think they're going to invest a lot in the draft. Wish they would have picked up some more defensive help in this free agency. Get some more veteran help with Geno Smith being a veteran quarterback. But we'll see how it goes. Poona Ford was a tough loss. He was a nice defensive lineman. And Rashad Penny, at best, he was going to be a second-string defensive player. Second-string running back to Kendall Walker, who was an exciting young rookie. But there's still value in being that second player, and we'll see how that goes. I gave the Seahawks a B. We got 2 more divisions. The NFC North. So we had the Chicago Bears first. So their top 3 additions were DJ Moore, Nate Davis, and Tremont Edmonds. Their top 3 departures were Nicholas Burlow, Riley Reeve, and David Montgomery. I gave the Bears an A+. I think they made out good with the trade with the Carolina Panthers. As of right now, I think that's a win-win for both teams. DJ Moore, a true number 1 receiver. I would put him right on the cusp of that top 10 receivers. And that's going to be great for Justin Fields' development. Improving on the offensive line, a lot of times he had a lot of yards rushing, but a lot of times that's because he had to run. Nate Davis is a solid offensive lineman to bring in. And, of course, when they traded away, forgetting his name right now, but the linebacker who got traded to the Baltimore Ravens, they had to replace him. I think Tremaine Edmonds, a young, athletic linebacker still. He's been in the league for a little while now, but he's still young, wildly athletic. I love his measurables. I believe he's 6'5", around the 250-pound range, running in the 4.5 range. Decent player. We got to see how he grades out in coverage, but The reason I gave them A plus is because they gained a lot more than they lost. Detroit Lions are next. Top 3 additions were Cameron Sutton, David Montgomery, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Top 3 departures were Amani Aruwari, sorry, the cornerback, DJ Chark, and Jamal Williams. I gave the Lions a B plus. I really like their addition to the secondary. I don't understand why C.J. Gardner-Johnson wasn't as valued in free agency, especially as what he thought and what I thought he was going to get. I thought he was one of the top 5 defensive backs that was in free agency this year. For him to get a 1-year prove-it deal, it was pretty shocking. And of course, we'll find out more as that story goes on. We'll see maybe why that happened, but we'll see how he does on the Lions. I believe in the guy. And they didn't lose much. We'll see what they do in the draft receiver-wise. They already got some young talent. Bringing back Marvin Jones, I liked that. He's a good presence in the locker room. And Jamal Williams was also a great presence in the locker room. He's a guy where you love his personality. And from the outside looking in, you got to think that maybe that was rubbing off on his teammate. He did seem to have a leadership role, and he led the NFL in rushing touchdowns last year, which is, you're losing a solid red zone running back. And there's value, we know, to getting into the end zone and to lead the league in that category. Maybe I'm underselling that loss, but I give the Lions a B plus. Next, we have the Green Bay Packers. It's not going to be good. So their top 3 additions were re-signing Keyshawn Nixon, Justin Hollins, and Rudy Ford. Top 3 departures were Jaron Reed, Robert Tonyan, and Alan Zard. I gave them a straight F. For you, you're losing 3 solid starters and not replacing them at all whatsoever. We got the Aaron Rodgers cloud hanging over. He's gonna be traded. It's looking like it's gonna be the New York Jets, unfortunately. But we'll have to see how they go, and maybe they embrace that second wave of free agency. And right now they're just in holding pattern. Finally, for the NFC North, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Their top 3 additions were Josh Oliver, Byron Murphy, and Garrett Bradham. Their top 3 departures were Patrick Peterson, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Adam Thielen. I gave the Minnesota Vikings a C. Didn't like the fact that they lost Patrick Peterson and defensive lineman and Dalvin Tomlinson and a veteran in the locker room and Adam Thielen. Maybe they felt like they needed a culture change, get a little bit younger, add some pieces, some more versatile pieces. I like the addition of Byron Murphy, bringing back Garrett Bradbury. The league doesn't – the offensive linemen are good, but the defensive linemen are exceptional in the NFL. And teams are starved for good offensive linemen or even competent offensive linemen. So Garrett Bradbury, he's on the competent side, definitely. And we have to see how it goes, but, they needed him back, so they got him back, and I respect that. But I gave them a C because I don't think they improved or had a disaster free agency period so far. Last division, we had the NFC East. The Dallas Cowboys. Top 3 additions were Stephon Gilmore, Tony Pollard, and Leighton Vander Esch. Top 3 departures were Connor McGovern, Ezekiel Elliott, and Dalton Schultz. I gave them an A. You hate losing Dalton Schultz, a starting tight end, but we don't know if Dallas is going to target a tight end in the draft, but we know due to their position that some really good tight ends in a strong tight ends draft are going to be available at that point. Losing Zeke, Zeke hasn't been the same player coming off that injury. He has a big contract. He probably wasn't coming back. Love the addition of Stephon Gilmore. Still think he's one of the top cornerbacks in the league. Tony Pollard, you had to bring him back. Very versatile and exciting player and productive player, most important. Leighton Vander Esch can be exposed in coverage sometimes, but he's a great run-stopping linebacker. You need those. He's a leader of that defense, was one of the best in the NFL last year. You needed to bring him back. Wish they would have made an addition to the offensive line. We'll see what they do in the draft. I gave the Cowboys an A. New York Giants. Top 3 additions were Darren Waller, Saquon Barkley, and Daniel Jones. Top 3 departures were Nick Gates, Landon Collins and Julian Love, starting safety. You hate to lose a starting safety, but this is a very deep draft for safeties, and we'll see how that goes. Saquon on the non-exclusive franchise tag. You have to bring back your quarterback, Daniel Jones. Obviously, they did good in their coaching search last year, and Brian DeBall, who got the best year out of Daniel Jones. Hopefully, his ascension continues. And Darren Waller, Daniel Jones, he has a new number one receiver now, and Darren Waller. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully, he can remain healthy, and hopefully it ain't too much stress on the family with the trade. But I gave the New York Giants a grade of A minus. I really like what they did this offseason. Our last two, the Philadelphia Eagles. Top three additions were James Bradbury, Darius Slay, and Jason Kelsey back from retirement. Top three departures were Miles Sanders, Isaac Sumulo, and Javon Hargrave. I gave the Eagles a B. Generally thinking the Eagles are probably the best front office in the NFL. Obviously, a lot of coaches gathered other teams from them, and a lot of executives from their front office. I have a lot of respect for the Eagles. I think they lost some starters and gained some starters, especially Javon Hargrave. But the thing about it is, we know they draft so well. So all three of these starters that they lost have young talent behind them that's going to be able to finally get the reps that they need to develop. And they have been developed in those veterans places. And we're going to see what that young talent does. It was key that they brought back Slay, even though he was projected to leave and he was saying he was going to leave. The Eagles found a way, and I think they're going to make another run at the Super Bowl this year. We got to see how it goes. Finally, we have the Washington Commanders. Top three additions were Deron Payne, Cameron Doltzler, and Jacoby Brissett to compete with Sam Howell. Top three departures were Wes Schweitzer, Cole Holcomb, and Taylor Heineke. Grade A. I think Jacoby Brissett is a huge upgrade over Taylor Heineke and anything Carson Wentz, anything that the Washington Redskins had in the quarterback room last year. I think he has a chance to beat out Sam Howell for the job. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Darren Payne was essential to bring back. He gets the second biggest contract for a defensive tackle in the NFL behind Aaron Donald. I think he's a very deserving player. Cameron Doltzer gets another chance to develop in a new scheme outside of Minnesota, and we'll see how it goes. But overall, I think they gained some starters, and I don't think they lost anything of major consequence. And if they did, they replaced it with an upgrade. So I gave the Washington Commanders an A. I'm dropping this video on the 1st, I believe. Then on the 2nd, we're going to have another video that's dropped, 37-minute podcast, episode 23. Y'all go check those out. Y'all like, comment, subscribe. I really appreciate y'all's support. Get in the comments. Let me know how y'all felt about y'all teams. Anything I said, anything I might have missed, some new additions. Tell me what y'all think. Engagement is key on this channel. I'm building it. We're building it together. I want to thank y'all. Y'all have a good one.